Welcome to the 18th video on Aristotle's Poetics. This video contains section 4, that is critical problems, and part 25 of the book. We know the whole text contains 26 different parts, and here in this video I will be explaining part 25 of the book, of the text. It is titled to be Critical Objections, How to Deal with Them. That is non-essential objections. Aristotle is going to talk about the way of dealing with the critical objections. Now, poet as an imitator, we know he must imitate someone of the three aspects of things. He begins the chapter by listing out those three aspects that poet as an imitator has to imitate. First one is either as things they were or are. Second one as men say they are and they seem to be. Third one as they ought to be. Let us see what happens with these three. See, as imitation, as imitating something, the things referred, things imitated should be of any of the three types. That either as they were or are. That means they were or are. One thing was like this, or that is like this. So this is the way, either in its past form of being or in its present form. Either it is about the action, it may be about some action or about the character, the way they existed once or the way they exist at present. So that can be a part of, that can be chosen as an imitation, as a cause or a part for imitation. Then the second one, as men say they are and they seem to be, or the way the people say about something, people feel about something, or that is why they or seem to be, or things they seem to be. Yeah, this character was of a virtuous kind, or the character held a lot of virtues, the person did a lot of good things or bad things. So men say about that, and then those come as our matter, our objects of imitation. And then, or at least it seems to be the things as people see or feel like that to be. Oh, that feels like something better, or it sounds like something really problematic. So this is the way people comment on something, and that also be part of our imitation. Or third one, as they ought to be. Ought as a see, we know how this usage of that term comes. Ought, how we ought. See, that's a usage. That's kind of there is a fixity in that, or at least a probability in that. So things as ought to be. So we feel like if that is like this, that may follow in that way. If it is that, of course this may be in this way or that way. So this is the way we assume things, or we at least expect something to be something. So that is the way we can take this imitation possibilities to be. And now he talks about vehicle of expression. We know it is obviously language. These are some points actually. These are about, now these chapters are always almost showing the nature of a conclusion of his whole discussion. So that vehicle of expression, we know in the case of any of such narrators, it is language, and he presents these in language which employs rare words and metaphors, and there are many modifications of diction. We know he prefers embellished kind of words whenever and wherever it is necessary. Only whenever it's necessary. That is the other clause that goes along with that. And the modifications, he tells the two kinds of error in the art of poetry. First thing he refers coming from the essence of the art, and second one the accidental. So two kinds of error in the art of poetry. One can be the coming of the essence of the art. Essence of, see, sometimes it comes from the very way it gets narrated, and second one can be accidental. Sometimes we talk even about, even in visualization, this is almost nowadays it is very common to point out some mistakes in some of the visual representations, films, and also this how it can occur. Sometimes it may be accidental. And now the first one is explained to be, if the poet chooses to imitate something and fails because of the lack of imitative ability, the error is in the poetic art itself. First kind of error occurs the essence from the essence of art, how the poet chooses to imitate something, he selects something but fails because of the lack of imitative ability. The error is in the poetic art itself. Sometimes a particular kind of art may not be able to represent certain kinds of action. So that is into the account of that. And what can be, how can you talk about accidental errors? It is if he makes a mistake about what he chooses to imitate or writes of impossible things, error is not essential to poetry or that art. Because sometimes there is an example here. See, sometimes it is like factual errors because of the error in his understanding, basic lack of idea about the basic nature of that representative object, then that can bring some accidental errors that may not be from the art at all. So there is an example, a very cute example given here. So that is again something impossible things are getting represented. That is here example goes like a horse with the two forelegs moving at the same time. So that is an error. Sometimes it's like there is sometimes even in Malayalam movie song there is a saying, see, Kombu Kulukkunna Penmane, something is like a song is there in Malayalam. So how can female deer can have such horns? That is a question. So these are errors, but for the sake of, sometimes for the sake of some rhyme convenience or something, rhythmic convenience, we may add those words without thinking about the other error that can go along with that. Sometimes this happens, and this is again another example. That's about that kind of animal that is impossible to move both forelegs at the same time at the same speed. So that is again an error, but that occurs because of the accidental way of representation, and that is not, we cannot attribute that to that artistic form. Now Aristotle continues, if he has represented impossible things, he has committed a fault, but he is right if he attains the end of poetry. And sometimes we can talk about end of poetry, the aim. End means the aim there, that is pleasure. So even if it is impossible, sometimes the poet represents something impossible, but that is a fault. Of course, that is a fault. And but that pleasure, if it is supposed to afford, if it is attained, then that can be in one way or other, that can be unnoticed, or sometimes we can appreciate that art as art. And if a poet is blamed for not presenting things truly, perhaps one cannot hold that poet, when dealing with them, presents something better than the reality or tells truth. Because see, presenting things truly, not presenting, if sometimes blames come for poets not for presenting things truly. But here Aristotle tells it's not about the way poets are not supposed to teach something truthful or something. This is about an art, and the basic idea is about getting pleasure out of that. And that's why perhaps one cannot hold that the poet, when dealing with them, presents something better than the reality or tells truth. We cannot even tell that, see, this is something better than truth when it is represented in art. There is no attempt on the part of Aristotle to justify that, but in other instances, one cannot defend the poet as presenting something better than himself. Sometimes that also, in other instances, one cannot defend the poet as presenting something better than himself. That is it. Again, yeah, that representation is really good. So why are you worried about the kind of very silly error there? That is the representation which is really out of the premise of truth. And we may be having such critical commentaries. It's all about the possible critical comments that come along with the reading of a reading of a poetry composition or whatever art form it may be. Now, some objections may be disposed of by recourse to the language. They may be borrowed words in the passage. There may be borrowed words in the passage. Words may be used metaphorically. That also is another possibility to avoid some objections. That may be disposed because sometimes some borrowed words, we feel like it is not that matching, but sometimes it may be more matching in the context. We know how people use, some writers use this mixed way of, sometimes the novel or novella or any other literary type may be told to be in some particular language, but at times for certain characters, some characters, their conversation, they use very specific or very even a different language with, and the variety, the dialectic varieties of the same. Even we can see sometimes to represent the colloquial nature of a character, they use the same language. Even sometimes when we read an English novel, sometimes we might be even during a time before some time, some novels we come across this quality of representing the characters, their speech, to make us feel that they are sometimes working class or some of a very illiterate kind, they are servants. So this is the way, this is an adoptive technique, not just in poetry. So that is the way he tells, like sometimes that may be borrowed words, sometimes may be used metaphorically. So you can avoid such, sometimes you can dispose such objections or critical comments in this way. And there may be a change in the way of reading. Sometimes another explanation is that of the habit of language, another explanation. See, language, and now that is highly modern, post-modern or post-structuralist in that regard. If you talk in terms of another reading, another explanation is that of habit of language. Habit of language, it is obviously open for another interpretations. So that is again highly post-modern, post-structuralist way of approaching language. Now, it is necessary when a word seems to suggest some self-contradictions. It is necessary when a word seems to suggest some self-contradictions to examine how many meanings it can have in the passage in question. Some words even self-contradictory in a context. So it is really good that we have an examination, we make an examination how many meanings it can have because of the particular word, how many meanings, different meanings that passage itself can hold. We can think all these because it's not just about defending the critical or objections on the art that is at hand, but it is also about making an giving exposure for far more interpretations and far more better readings we can come up with. Now he talks about the bad critics who take up an irrational opinion and, having decreed its truth for themselves, proceed to draw conclusions from it, and assuming the poet has said what their fancy required, blame him if he writes something inconsistent with it. See, now it is about bad critics. Now, till this moment, he has been talking about the possible critical commentaries or objections that may occur because of certain reasons, internal or external, or some errors or our own other words and some borrowed words. These possibilities are all there and we have to anticipate. That's why a writer cannot expect all his or her works to be appreciated by everyone, every reader. That is totally impossible because people are different, their views, perspectives are different. But now he talks about some bad critics who have the tendency to assume something already rationally, something they already assume, or sometimes they may approach a text with some prejudices. They have already set some truth for themselves and proceed to draw conclusion from it. So there is no change. They are never ready to change that opinion. And assuming the poet has said what their fancy required, blames him if he writes something inconsistent with it. So till a point they think that the poet also says according to my own understanding or idea, but there is a point when it occurs when they feel that this poet tells this opinion is something different, and without thinking or without at least being ready to change their or thinking in a different way with their perspective, they begin blaming the poet for writing in this way or being inconsistent. So the poet never makes a promise to be consistent with their poet, means the writers in general, they never make a promise that I will be following this concept itself in this narration throughout. But there are bad critics who expect that, and once they find out certain other move or their distraction from that, or they are going away from that, then they start blaming the whole narration or the whole book in general. Now Aristotle talks about the impossible. It is in general necessity to account for the impossible in poetry by saying that it makes a work better than the reality, or that it is in harmony with opinion. For in poetry a credible impossibility is to be chosen before as an incredible possibility. That is again one thing. Credible possibility is preferred than incredible possibility. Something may be possible, but no one can believe. That thing cannot be chosen in an art form when you mean it for presenting it before an ordinary, or for presenting it before a multitude of audience or readers. Then there should be something that is credible impossibility, that is preferred. Just see the way Aristotle talks about making a work appreciable. Credible impossibility, maybe highly impossible. Something you choose to narrate may be highly impossible or literally totally impossible, but if it is credible on the part of the audience, that also will help to shorten or cut short the kind of the lack of reception that can be avoided. The whole lack of reception can be somewhere managed when it is something credible. People want that. People really want that. At least majority want something that is credible. That is why we always choose. Sometimes we choose for watching some fantasy movies or fantasy books, but there is we have to. When we think in general, there is of course a fascination on the part of, at least a preference on the part of the common people to choose something which is something related with them, their life. That is why he talks about making everything something natural as well as something from our own in between, or there is even the character should be from within our, so something related or something matching with the personality of the people in general, the common people in general. Now, as the irrational, it can be defended because it presents what is commonly said, and also because sometimes it is not wholly irrational, for there is a probability. There is a probability that things will happen contrary to probability. So, of course, there is a chance every time. Now, there is no fixity in anything. We do not know. We even witnessed how wells disappeared all of a sudden on one fine morning. There were paper reports. Those were not some fables. So, we never heard about it before that. But again, there was a time when newspapers featured many incidents where all of a sudden on one fine morning the people, owners of the home, didn't see the well in front of their homes. So that is again, but that is not something common also. See, we cannot tell about that kind of a phenomena or some kind of a happening. As we talk about the well getting the whole water level going down in a well as often in summer vacations, so that we cannot talk about, but something impossible or improbable is likely to happen. From that, contrary to probability, something may happen. We do not know. We cannot tell or we cannot assure. Still, if there is a minimum 1% chance, we can add this in our artistic representations. Now, contradictions in language are to be examined like proofs in a debate to see whether they indicate the same thing in the same relation and are used in the same way, that we may explain the poet's work according to what he himself says or what a man of sense would assume. See, contradictions in language that are to be examined like proofs in a debate. In a debate, we are not always like, yeah, the other party is talking something really against my idea, so I do not want to hear. No, that is not the way we approach a debate. We listen to the extremely contradictory opinions. Here it is yes, that is no, but still you are ready to listen, or you are at least from that you draw other meanings, other new points. You add points to your side. Then you to see whether they indicate the same thing in the same relation and are used in the same way, that we may explain the poet's work according to what he himself says or what a man of sense would assume. At least these possible connections can be drawn, or at least we can get something out of that. That is the way. It's just about the language he talks about. And it is right to blame irrationality and wickedness when a poet uses irrationality without any necessity. That again is there. We always listen to the other party in a debate to point out something irrational. If that is highly irrational, we can always contradict we can always tell against we can always raise our points against their ideas. But there is again the man of sense, that is in a wickedness. If they are presenting irrationality, if they are presenting, we have to. That is again objection. That is again the duty of a good reader, good critic, good commentator. See, that is again necessary, but for the sake of making critical objections, that bad critics, their practice we have already come across, and that can be avoided in any context. And now the matters objected to by critics are of 5 species. He lists out 5 different ways, different species of objections that can come. First is about the objection against the impossible, totally impossible things represented that can be objected by in criticism. The second one, the irrational, equally irritating, irrational, something beyond our rational power. Then the third one, the immoral. Yeah, that is again actually during his time it was really high. That is immoral things when portrayed on stage or in art, that is again objected. Then the contradictory, same person telling the contradictory or same statement, the same art representing something contradictory, coming up with some contradictory ideas. And the last and the fifth one, that which violates correctness in a poetic art. That is violating correctness. There is nothing right. It doesn't stand with the correctness in poetic art. That also can be objected. These are commonly we can talk, but in context, if context specifically also we can take some examples and we can see how objections can come, but that objections are again adding more to our art. Otherwise there is nothing. See, just if an art, that is why see later critics Eliot told it is as inevitable as breathing. Criticism is as inevitable as breathing. So objections are also to be taken as something really positive. Only then writers and other readers will come across the shortcomings or other mistakes or irrationalities. At times, at least, it should not affect our reading of the book. We should not feel like, I should not read that book because the other persons talk about the irrationality. Just we have to try with the reading, and still then we have to find out if something can be tackled out, if something can be again found out. Some other irrationalities also we can come across. That is, objections are always welcome when it adds to the interpretation as well as more reading and activities on that particular work of art. And with this, Aristotle ends part 25 of his Poetics text. Thank you.